Research shows that around 40% of Singaporeans in their early 20s have never dated someone, and they often cite career and financial priorities, Violet. At what point does that become detrimental for them? And when do they realize that, okay, maybe now I need to start looking?
I always tell people, like, the best place to date is really when you're at university. And that's like the advice that I give to parents as well. I'm like, okay, please do not stop your kids from dating. Because you know, some people do, right? And then the funny story is like they stop them dating all this while, and then once they start working, they're like, hey, where's your boyfriend? Another thing that I heard, which is very interesting from some young singles as well, they talk about ROI. So they're like, if I'm going to spend like my hours, my time, my effort on my job, chances are I'm going to get that promotion, I'm going to get that increment, I'm going to get that bonus. But the ROI of me spending on a relationship, it's a black hole. I never know. It doesn't need to be mutually exclusive. You can always do it together. You know, just because you're working on your career doesn't mean that you cannot date.
Violet Lim is the CEO of 𝙒𝙧𝙤𝙪𝙘𝙀𝙀, actually, Singapore's leading matchmaking service. She has decades of experience helping singles find meaningful relationships and has guided clients through the modern dating landscape, from casual dating to serious long-term partnerships. She is here to help us understand why dating can feel harder than ever, what singles really want, and how to approach relationships with clarity, intention, and emotional readiness. Violet, you've organized over 161,000 dates,
that's
right?
yeah.
I just saw. So based on that, what are some patterns that you really see that people fear the most when it comes to relationships?
One of it we see quite often is definitely fear of rejection.
Okay.
Yeah, before joining us, they might have certain opportunities, but maybe they never pursue it because they are fearful that they might be rejected. Or like even when we make certain, I would say, matches for them, they might be reluctant to go for it. But if you ask them, they'll just be like, oh, you know, like I just don't think it's suitable. But when you dig a bit deeper, then you can see that maybe they're just worried that it's not going to work out. Yeah.
So even in relationships, that motto is like, just do it. You know, right?
Yes,
just get out there.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Just do it is one. The other thing is like, maybe it's not so romantic to think about it this way, but I always say like, dating is a numbers game. It's like, if you think about it, like if you meet 10 people, like how many of these 10 people are someone that you'll be interested in? So let's just say optimistically, let's say it's 4. So out of these 4, how many do you end up going on a first date with? Right? And then after that first date, how many do you end up going on a second date with? So if you kind of look at it,
it's a numbers
like,
game.
Yeah, it is a numbers game because like, let's say your conversion rate is very high, right? 10 become 5, 5 become 2, 2 become 1. But how many people actually meet 10 people like regularly? Right? So that's why when we talk about just do it, it's really just do it. Just meet people.
When people say they want a serious relationship, for example, you know, they come in and then they say, hey, you know, I want to get into this serious relationship, right? But they behave in a way that goes against that. So what are some of these things that they do that, you know, goes against what they're actually telling you?
Wow, I think like there are just so many different layers of the onion to peel. I think first and foremost is like a lot of times, of course, like we want to look for companionship, we want to be in a relationship. But I think first and foremost is also to examine whether we are ready to be in a relationship. Yeah, so again, you know, like this is going to tell my age, but like long ago, there's this movie called 𝘼𝙧𝙤𝙪𝙘𝙀, right?
Oh, yeah. I know your age now.
And then, you know, like there's a part where he kind of said like, you complete me. Yes. And I think like, of course it was like such a beautiful line. But at the same time, like that's also kind of like the problem if you think about it. Because I always tell like my singers, I say it's like we should not be looking for someone to complete us. So it's really about we already complete ourselves. Then we find another person who's also complete. And then we can come together and be in a relationship.
And in that sense, you know, how do you tell that someone that when they are ready for a relationship, how do you know that this person is ready for a relationship?
So usually like when we meet them for a consultation, we talk a lot about like where they are right now, you know, what they are looking for, and also about past relationships as well. It's like we have had clients who, you know, we have a good talk, we understand where they're coming from, and then finally when we say, okay, so what are you looking for? And then suddenly this person kind of like take out his phone or her phone and kind of like, oh, this is like my ex girlfriend or ex-boyfriend, and I kind of want someone like this.
Oh, okay.
And you're like, okay, maybe this person has not moved on from their past relationships yet, right?
Right.
So in those cases, we will say like, okay, why don't you take some time, because it does take time to get over a relationship, right? So when you're more ready, like you have moved on, then let's talk about it. There are also people who like might have very traumatic relationships, and then they carry like certain, I would say, scars or trauma from it. So in those cases, we might even recommend for them to like meet up with like a therapist, to really work on that. Because we do offer coaching, but when it comes to coaching, it's really about looking forward. So if they do have some unresolved trauma, like we usually would recommend them to, deal with that first before we start working with that.
Right.
Yes.
And how do they respond, when you tell them this? Because not everybody will think it's a me problem.
So usually like when we are having a chat with them, we'll kind of gauge like where their readiness level is. And we also ask them, are you open to some feedback? So some people are like, you can see that they're not so comfortable, then we just feel that maybe it's not the time. So we would let them know gently, because it might even be a blind spot. It's not so much about like they didn't want to acknowledge it or admit it, but they did not even see it.
Right.
Yes. So when we dig a bit deeper, then they kind of realize that, like there's kind of like a pattern that's happening. And that's where we kind of help them to really go to the, I would say, source of the issue or the challenge before we can kind of like help them move on. Because I think to be in a relationship, like someone needs to be able to be vulnerable as well. So we'll be like, okay, like if you meet someone, like are you ready to like kind of open up your heart? Are you willing to be vulnerable? And then sometimes you can see that they are a bit like not at that level or not at that point, and then that's where we also try to find out from them like what is actually stopping you, like why are you hesitant to really be open or to be more transparent.
Right. And you mentioned about vulnerability, right? But people might see that vulnerability as a weakness,
Yes.
so to speak, right?
Yes.
So how do you counter that for your couples?
So for us, we'll share that there are different stages when it comes to being in a relationship. So obviously, like the first part, it's like attraction, getting to know each other. So we always tell them like in the first 3 dates, right? Kind of see it as you are building your emotional bank account. Like when you go into any relationship, you are meeting someone for the first time. Like maybe it's like at 0 or like maybe neutral because you do not know this person. But as you get to know this person better, then it's like you're depositing like positive emotions, right? So eventually when you start to share something deeper, being vulnerable and sharing it, like then you are in a way like withdrawing from it.
Okay.
Yes. So that's why we always say that in the first couple of dates, like talk about things that are more positive, things that you're passionate about, things that would build that emotional bank account. But as you go along, when it's time to like really go deeper, like to be more vulnerable, like then you'll be more comfortable to share. So because like this person is not just going to like ghost you, right? Because you just share something maybe a bit shocking or different.
Right.
Yes.
So, like don't go on your first day and talk about your ex, basically.
Yeah, that would generally be our advice.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Right. Now, research shows that around 40% of Singaporeans in their early 20s have never dated someone of the opposite gender.
Yes.
And they often cite career and financial priorities, Violet. So in your view, right, when people do prioritize work, and other goals, right, at what point does that become detrimental for them? Meaning that you're focusing so much on this, are you letting the other side go? And, how can they strike that balance? And when do they realize that, okay, maybe now I need to start looking?
Okay. So I always tell people like the best place to date is really when you're at university. And that's like the advice that I give to parents as well. I'm like, okay, please do not stop your kids from dating. Because, some people do, right? They're like, like focus on your studies, like I've spent so much time, money, and then you are doing so well. You should not date, you should only date once you start work and things like that, right? And then the funny story is like they stop them dating all this while. And then once they start working, they're like, hey, where's your boyfriend?
Yeah, you absolutely hit it on the nail because it's a very Asian thing to do.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I feel why people do that is because again, like maybe parents like say, oh, don't date. Or maybe they also have the responsibility that they feel that, okay, like I'm in this really amazing university, like I want to study hard, get good grades, and then I get into this great job. And then they're kind of like, since I'm in this great job, I want to like focus on it and, make something out of it. And then another thing that I heard, which is very interesting from some young singers as well, they talk about ROI. So they're like, look at it this way. If I'm going to spend like my hours, my time, my effort on my job, chances are I will get somewhere. Chances are I'm going to get that promotion, I'm going to get that increment, I'm going to get that bonus. But the ROI of me spending on a relationship, it's a black hole. I never know.
Oh my, that's
Yeah.
such a clinical, statistical way of looking at it.
So I always like share like the concept of it doesn't need to be mutually exclusive. Yeah, you can always do it together. Like, just because you're working on your career doesn't mean that you cannot date.
And for these youngsters, right, do you say, since we're on the topic
Yes.
as well, for young singles,
Yep.
right, do you feel that social media plays a big part in how
Oh.
they perceive relationships
For
today?
sure. Like, I just feel like in the past, like maybe someone would feel that, oh, no, I'm just going to like take a break. I'm not going to focus on relationship yet. And then like maybe people around them, 80% are like, oh no, you really should find a relationship. And then they're 20, they're like, oh yeah, I should, I feel like I should listen to their advice. But now with social media, they go on social media and they find the rest of the 20%.
Right.
Right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
and suddenly
exactly.
they feel very validated. Yeah, like, I'm okay, like a lot of people are doing the same thing. Like,
Correct.
nothing wrong with it. Like, why should I like even really think about it right now?
Right.
Yeah.
No, adding on to that, we also had COVID
Yes.
in the middle of all of
Yes,
this,
definitely.
right? And
Yeah.
in 2020, I think life as we knew it completely changed.
Yes.
Connection, communication
Definitely.
completely changed. And I
Yes.
have to say, maybe those right now in their 20s
Yes.
were the most
They really missed out on
missed
like,
out a
the-
lot of things,
Yes,
right?
that's
And I
right.
think that has affected them quite deeply
Yeah.
now in terms of looking for a relationship.
Yes.
So how have you seen that happening?
I think in the past, like one of the ways to meet people is really like parties, and then like drinking is definitely like part of the process of growing up.
Yes.
Yes. But now it's like, sober partying, like, like they don't even drink, or like since they don't drink, it doesn't need to be at night anymore. Right?
Yeah.
Things like that. So it's very interesting. So I think like definitely like what you have mentioned, like because of COVID, I think it does affect like how they communicate. Like, so in fact, my friend was telling me the other day, I think his son is like maybe late teens, like so 19 or 20. And then he's like, oh, so usually they communicate with each other like at home, like they are playing games, and then at the same time they're on Discord and they are talking and things like that, talking about a game and whatever. So one day they decided to go and meet in person. So they went like maybe to McDonald's or something, right? And then they have nothing to talk about.
Oh dear.
Yeah, like they just don't know how to communicate with each other. And then
Okay.
they're like, it's okay, let's just go home and play game. And then it's fine. They start talking again.
Okay, that is weird.
Yeah, so it's not as natural anymore. Because I think in the past, it's very natural for us to just have conversations.
yeah. Now, as we move into that from COVID to social media, right? Another term that comes up quite often
Yes.
now, especially with the 20-something
Yes.
year olds, is situationship.
Yeah.
That completely blew my mind.
Yes.
So, like from a millennial's lens, it's like friends with benefit, but apparently it's not. You're still in a relationship, but also you're not. So, what does this behavior tell you? When, in this current generation of, people looking for love, this situationship.
It tells me that someone is on the losing end. I
Yes.
feel. Yeah. Because let's say someone says that, we are in a situationship, but the other person actually wants to be in a relationship. But the person is kind of like, I do still want to be in this, but since the other person don't want to be in a relationship, then I just kind of like, okay lah, I also say I'm in a situationship.
So they go along with it.
Yeah. So it's like, I feel someone is always kind of like giving into it. Yeah. But at the same time, because it's so widely accepted, so then, then it just kind of go along with it.
Go along with it.
Yes.
So in your experience, Violet, having, organized so
Yes.
many dates, right? If you were to tell us firmly right now, what is one habit that we should actually just break away from as we are looking to find a relationship or looking to explore at the very least?
One habit to break away from, I would say probably the checklist syndrome.
No, okay.
Because, we always say like, okay, like what are your preferences? So I think that's the challenge, because like when people start thinking about their preferences and then they're like, oh, like I want this, I don't want that, I want that, I don't want that. And then for example, like for ladies, one of like the deal breakers or a huge thing is the guy's height.
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 Oh,
As ridiculous as it sounds, like I can understand why someone might actually do it. Yeah. But at the same time, I always ask them, I say, so what are you looking for? Are you looking for like a one night stand? Are you looking for a fling? Are you looking for, just for fun, right? Because if you are looking for a short-term relationship, obviously you want to look for someone who is like tall, dark, handsome, whatever, right? But if you're looking for a long-term relationship, then what are you looking for? If you're looking for like someone who's going to be like a good husband, good father, like honestly, like height has nothing to do with it. So if that's what you're looking for, that's what's important to you, then shouldn't you be focusing on criteria that will help you achieve that objective? Yeah.
so On the contrary, what are the factors that we should be looking at?
Okay. So when we match, right? Like sometimes people will say that, oh, because I'm very extroverted, should I choose someone who's introverted, or someone I'm very outdoorsy, should I only meet with someone who's very outdoorsy? So of course all of these things like personality traits and like hobbies and interests is good to have, it's nice to have. But for us when we are matching, like what really we look at and we feel is most important is actually their values. So what are their life values, financial values, like family values, like religious values, or like even, someone, are they looking to constantly improve themselves? Yeah, like self-improvement value, growth value. Because some people, they are like, I'm quite happy. Like once I hit, they're quite contented. But some people, they constantly want to challenge the status quo. So if you have someone who is like kind of like very contented, like, I'm happy, I'm good. And the other person is just kind of like, no, like we need to keep improving, we need to keep driving. Then it's going to be a big problem.
Yeah, it's going to drive a wedge between them because their values don't align. So this is where even if the person is tall, dark and handsome, it doesn't work out, right? Right. So having said that, when a person goes on a date, right, when should they bring this up in the conversation?
Okay, so a lot of people go on dates and then they just end up not having a second date. So for example, like I met this lady, like she told me she has been on 100 dates, 100 first dates. Then I'm like, so how many of it ended up as a second date? Like, so not many. So then I asked her, I say, so what do you think is the objective of a first date? Yeah. And then her answer is, the objective of a first date is to info gather.
Okay.
Yeah. So, which again, like back to the ROI story, it's very logical, right? It's like, I go on a first date to info gather. But if your objective on a first date is to info gather, and that's like, the energy you're bringing into that first date, that's why you don't get many second dates. Because imagine you are going into a first date to info gather, like how do you think you'll behave?
Right. Like an interrogator.
Yeah, exactly, right? Exactly. And that's what some guys have said to me, I say like, how did that date go? Like, why didn't it work out? And then the person was like, I felt like I was being interrogated.
How much do you earn?
Yeah, I felt like, like the person is like, holding a machine gun and just shooting at me, and I'm just like, kind of like, So I always tell like my singers, the objective of a first date is actually to secure a second date.
Ooh.
So if you think about it that way, it's a very different, feel. Like you will go into this date behaving very differently. It will feel very different. Then their question will be like, but what if I don't want a second date? I say, it's okay. It's okay. You don't want a second date. When the person say, are you open to go on a second date? You can always say no, right? Yeah, but if you go in thinking that the objective of a first date is to ensure that there's going to be a second date, you're going to be interesting, you're going to be engaging, you're going to be interested. It's just so different. And then the other thing is that how do you know whether you should go on a second date, right? So a lot of people think like, again, I ask my clients, I say, so, are you going to go on a second date? And they'll be like, no, I won't. Then I'll be like, why? Then they say, because there's no chemistry. I didn't feel the sparks fly.
Chemistry, butterflies in the stomach. Okay.
So actually I tell singles, right, I say the way to decide whether you're going to go on a second date or not is not how good the first date went. It's how not bad the first date went. Okay. Unless you went on a date and it was a disaster, like you're like, oh my goodness, like this is the worst thing that ever happened before, right? But if it was just like, okay, normal, like neutral, nothing terribly good happened, nothing terribly bad happened, you should go on a second date. So the reason for that is because, like having sent out like 161,000 first dates and having like witnessed like thousands of like successful couples, I would say most of these couples are not love at first sight. Yeah. Most of these couples, they went on a date. We asked them to score it like on a scale of 1 to 10. How was the match? Usually it's about a 6, 7, not bad. And then they went on a second date. And then they went on a third date, and then that's where they get to know each other better. And you're like, it worked. Yeah, because different dates will show you different sides of the person. So for us, like the first date is always over a meal, hence the name lunch actually.
Right.
Because we just feel that, you need to eat anyway, right? So why not just eat with someone, like get
enjoy
to know someone better,
a
enjoy a meal, right? But the second date, it could be something else. It could be like go watch a movie together, like do an activity together, or just go for a walk, go
anything.
So something different. And when you do something different, you see a different side of the person. Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes, people like on first date, they might have like first date jitters, they are like a bit nervous, or they might just have a bad day from work, things like that, right? So when you meet again, like that's going to give you a chance to get to know this person better.
Speaking of which, right, you mentioned earlier, going back to a little bit about the checklist,
Yes.
right? I think some time ago, there
Yep.
was this girl
Yep.
who, went, I think on TikTok or Instagram
Yes.
saying that, this guy took me to 𝙒𝙧𝙤𝙪𝙘𝙀. I don't know if you remember
okay,
that,
okay,
right?
Okay.
And-
The one I remember is a CDC voucher.
one of it, yeah. So I think there's one CDC voucher and there was
Yes,
another
𝙒𝙧𝙤𝙪.
girl who said that, this guy took me to 𝙒𝙧𝙤𝙪,
Yes.
and I think she was a bit annoyed by that
Yes, yes,
situation.
yes.
So that comes with the checklist as well, right? So how should, we manage that expectations? Well, not we, but,
But I think again, right, I think that's really about values as well, if you think about it. Like there could be some people that they will be very okay that the first date is at 𝙒𝙧𝙘𝙀. You know what I'm trying to say?
Right.
It's like they'll be like, okay, like that means this guy is really thrifty, and like I'm looking for someone who is really thrifty, right? I mean, there are really people who say I don't like flowers and like don't waste your money, like give me something else.
Correct.
So I think that was one definitely like mismatch of values. Yeah, but of course, on the other side, again, like coming back to the concept of EBA, right? Emotional bank account. Like the first couple of dates, like you need to be building that bank account, right? Like eventually you go to 𝙒𝙧𝙘𝙀 is fine, but maybe not
On the first date.
first few dates.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. So it's good to have a neutral ground like Din Tai Fung or something.
Yeah.
Something like that, right?
Yes.
So that actually also brings us back. I think constantly, the idea of, we talked about, the Hollywood movies,
Yes.
the idea of, like falling in love.
Yes.
I think all of that is great because all of us want that feeling. So the idea of having that one,
Yes.
right, is still a very powerful commitment that people want, right?
Yes.
So do you actually think, Violet, from your experience, does this actually build more anxiety, or does this actually help people focus on a goal to walk towards?
Honestly, I don't believe in the concept of soulmate or the one. Okay. Like there are like several, like the ones or soulmates in that sense. Yeah. And just because like it worked with this person, it doesn't mean that it cannot work with another person. That's kind of how I see it. And I feel the one actually is really about commitment as well. Yeah. I mean, once you have decided that this is the one, right? Then you just kind of make it work.
Right. Now, we spoke about values.
Yes.
We also spoke about the checklist where,
Yes.
things like height
Yes.
and all that comes in. But the other aspect of it is age, right? Age gaps are a reality, right? Sometimes you can't help if you like someone who's a lot older or someone is younger. So, how do you see that? What kind of importance does that play in a relationship?
So I think age gaps, right? It really depends on when that age gap happens. So let's say if the person is like 20,
Yeah.
okay, and the other person is like 40, let's say, then it seems like a huge gap, clearly, because you're in completely different life stage.
Right.
Yeah. But let's say if you are 30, the person is like 45, it's like there is a 15 years gap, but maybe not so different. So the way I see it is really more about life stage rather than age. Yeah. So life stage and also maturity. Because it's like if someone is like really starting out in their career, like they are just seeing the world, and then the other person is kind of like a retiree, right? Like it's just going to be so different. But let's say someone is like of a age where they are really quite stable, they're already semi-retired, even though the other person is younger. But the person is at a life stage where they are happy to be at that stage as well. It might
Why
work
not?
out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have seen relationships where the guy is, almost 20 years older than the girl. But it works because like in terms of life goals, in terms of life stage, in terms of maturity, like they manage to make it work.
Okay, so basically look at the life you are at.
Yes.
So it's very common, as you mentioned, for men to
Yep.
date younger women, right? But
Yep.
when women want to date younger men, it's sometimes, I would say, frowned upon.
Yes,
So how can
yes.
women approach that? I mean, like you mentioned, if they are in the right life stage,
Yes.
right?
I feel like in the past, it's a huge taboo, and then like people kind of like talk about it like, I don't know, in like not a very approving tone, right? But I really feel that in the last 5 years or so, like it's starting to be a lot more acceptable. I think maybe again, like media has to do with it. I think we see a lot of like dramas. I think dramas, like they have such a huge impact
Influence.
sometimes, and influence. So like Korean drama, like a lot of like, they call it like Nuna romance, which is like older sister and like younger brother sort of romance, right? And in fact, we do get clients coming to us and then they are asking to date younger men. Yeah.
Interesting.
So they are like, yes, maybe I'm in my early 40s or like I'm in my mid 40s, but actually like I work out a lot, like my mindset, my lifestyle, like I feel I'm more suited to date someone who's younger because like someone who's older, like they might be, more, I don't know, sedated or something, they don't exercise as much, things like that. But of course, having said that, it's also not easy for us when it comes to the matching, I have to say. But we do start to see, ladies having such preference as well because they just feel that, which is true, a lot of them, they work very hard to like maintain their health, their fitness. So in fact, they probably look 5 or 10 years younger than their actual age.
They may not look 40s.
Yes,
look like
definitely.
30s.
Yeah. And I feel like people are starting to be more accepting towards it. And honestly, I feel the way I see it is that people should just be confident in their own skin and people are going to judge anyways.
Right,
like
no matter what you
Yes,
do.
like people are going to judge you based on like how old the person is or how young the person is or how rich the person is or how... People are just going to judge. So I feel that if you know what you're looking for, you feel that this works for you, or you meet someone who, both of you get along, things work out, and the person is younger, I would say just go with it.
Right.
Like don't be affected just because of how other people...
How society sees
Yes,
it. Right.
definitely.
Then leaning into there as well, Violet, we spoke about age, we spoke about, like physical appearances, but there's other aspects of it as well. It's like, Singapore is very multicultural,
yes,
right?
definitely.
So we have different nationalities, different races,
Yes.
Getting into
Yes,
relationship
yes.
as well. How does that work?
What we have seen is, again, people are getting very open to it. Like I think now people are quite open to dating people from different ethnicities, different nationalities. And I think, again, this shows like how society is like maturing and to see beyond like racial groups or like different countries. And I think people are really starting to really see people for who they are. Yeah, so it really doesn't matter like where you come from or like, which ethnicity you're from. And I think that's really very healthy. So in fact, again, we start to see in terms of the dating preferences of our clients, like in the past, it's maybe a lot more, I would say, fixed. Yeah, so it's kind of like they only want to stick to their own race. But I think now people are just a lot more open. They are kind of like, okay, maybe this is my preferred race. And sometimes it's not even their preference. Sometimes it could even be their family preference, right? And they're kind of like, okay, it's like, I mean, just so that my parents like, don't kill me or nag at me. Maybe that's my first preference. But at the same time, I'm open to like, these other ethnicity groups as well.
Right. So when people want to remain open, what is they must keep in mind? Because when you are dating someone of your own ethnicity or nationality, you have some common ground there already. So you already kind of bridge that, right?
Yes.
So when you move into a different space like that, what should they keep in mind?
So I think if you are going to be open to go into like interracial or internationality sort of relationship, to keep an open mind, to understand that things are not like what it seems sometimes. You need to read between the lines, and of course probably get some tips and pointers from your partner before meeting their family, parents and things like that, because I mean certain things are very acceptable to
one culture,
but it's very different from another culture. But the way I see it is because relationships now are like so international as well, right? Like if it works for you, like both of you, like maybe his family or her family, they might not even be in the same country. So maybe you only meet like once a year or twice a year.
Over the holidays.
Yeah. So I feel it's like if it works for both of you, then I'm sure you can navigate around like, the rest of it.
Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned a very important thing earlier, right? There's this saying, I'm sure you've heard of it as well. You're not marrying the person, but you're marrying the family.
Yes.
Right? What should a single look out for in terms of, looking at that person and also their family?
So I think this is also something where the family values like come into play as well. Because I think some people, they are very close to their family. like, they are probably like talking to their family like every single day, or like they are in like chat groups that constantly, they have interactions. And then there are people who like maybe really see their family once a year. So maybe the person who's like don't see the family like more than once a year, like doesn't mean that this person won't be close to the other person's family, right? Because again, it's just very different dynamics altogether. I think as long as both parties are very clear about their boundaries and also similar expectations, I think it would work. So for example, like let's say the person who is not as close to his or her family as the other person, and then they kind of can live with it. They are like, it's okay, I know from day one that this is how it is, you're very close to your family, you need to visit them every day or every week or whatever. So it's like, it's okay, you go for it. But then let's say if this person, because of the nature or like just how they are, they do not want to go every week, for example, then that's where the problem happens, right?
Right.
Yeah. Then the other person kind of like need to agree or disagree or come to a compromise, right? Okay, so maybe I'm not so comfortable going every week, but I'll go once a month, for example. And then you kind of stick to it. Yeah. So it is about compromising. I mean, of course, again, we all wish that everybody will get along, everybody will love each other. But I feel it's also not easy, because clearly, even with friends, like there'll be people we like and we don't like, right? So why would it be any different with family? Yes.
Okay. Now, speaking of that, right, we mentioned the checklist earlier, and I think singles do have a huge checklist, right? But at what point, should they kind of manage that checklist? So, sometimes singles may feel, I don't want to settle. If you ask them to, lower the points of their checklist, right? Like, for example, I want a tall guy, but no, you have to accept it. So they are, they may feel like they are settling, right? In that sense, how do you explain to a single that actually this is a mature decision? You're not betraying what you are looking for.
So I think the concept of settling is very interesting. So I just want to share with you a real life situation. So I have this friend, like she was dating this guy for about 2 years, close to 3 years. But at that point, she told me that she's going to get married, right, to this guy. So actually this guy ticks all the boxes. But then when I asked her, it's like, so how do you actually feel about this guy? It's like, on a scale of like 0 to 100%, right? Like, do you really think this is the guy for you? Okay. And she's kind of like, honestly, like probably it's a 60-70%.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Then I'm like, okay, so in that case, like, why are you getting married? Because we all know that, again, not to deter people who are looking to get married. We all know that like the first part, is like everything is great, like honeymoon. And then eventually, like reality hits, right? So if you're already feeling this way, like before you even get married, like why would you want to get married, right?
True.
And then that was when she shared with me, she says, because, I'm not getting any younger. I've already invested like 2 years, coming to 3 years on this guy. And he kind of tick all the boxes, like my parents like him and, So it's like, if I'm just going to break off with this guy right now and I start all over again, so it's like, I've wasted all of this time with this guy. So it's like, do I really want to start all over again? And like, would I find another person who like really maybe hit the 80, 90, 100%? So she decided to get married to this guy. Okay. So to me, actually that's settling.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, in this situation, this story didn't turn out well and eventually they got divorced. Yeah. So I feel like when people talk about settling, I think they are looking at very superficial criteria. Right? So they're kind of like, okay, I was looking for someone who like tick all the boxes, like, maybe for, like, let's say if I'm a guy, I'm looking for a girl who's like, fairly good looking or something, right? It's usually more superficial. Same thing like for a girl, I'm looking for something more superficial. But again, like what I say, ultimately, you are not looking for a one-night stand, right? You're not looking for a good time. You are really looking for someone that you're going to spend the rest of your life with. So if this person, like even though they might tick all of the boxes, but you do not have that connection with them. So I really love like the saying, right? Like sometimes, when people get married and then they kind of say like, I married my best friend. Yeah. And I really love that saying because I think that's so important, because at some point, like the passion is going to fizzle out. The romance is going to be a bit like, but the connection, the intimacy, like emotional intimacy, if there's something you have from the start and you feel so, I would say, safe with this person, like you feel that you can always be vulnerable with this person, like this person is your best friend, that's something that's going to last, as you go along, even through like the highs and lows, the peaks and valleys. The so-called like sparks, the like, this person makes my heart beat very fast when I see him or her. That's going to like fade off at some point. And then once that fade off, then what happens? Right? And then that's why like I have had friends who shared with me, like after they get married, they're kind of like, I always go home late or I always leave the house early. Then I'm like, why are you doing that?
Why?
Then I'm like, is there something funny that's happening? Then they're like, no. I'm just like staying on in the office, or I just like go out with friends, because they have nothing to talk to their wife when they go home. So then that's kind of sad, right? So that's why I just feel like people need to rethink the concept of settling.
Right.
Yep.
So settling is really based on the values, right?
Yes.
You don't settle on the values.
Yes.
Now, as we come to a close, Violet, there's one area that I think a lot of couples may actually struggle with is closeness and space, right? One person might want that space.
Yes.
The other person wants to be with the person all the time.
Yes.
How can, couples navigate this?
I think first and foremost is to just have a very open and honest conversation about it. I think once you kind of like notice it, like rather than kind of sweep it under the carpet and hopefully that it's going to go away, or you try to do certain things and hope the other person get the hint.
Or build resentment towards it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's just really to have an open conversation about it. And really, it's really about compromising, right? Like, so let's say some people, they kind of like, okay, I expect to spend 24/7 together, right? And the other person kind of like, I'm kind of like happy to just let's say they're still dating, they're not married yet, right? I'm happy to just kind of meet like 3 times a week because, like I'm busy with work, like I have friends that I need to meet up with, I need to like meet my family or whatever not. And just kind of having that conversation, so at least the other person know that it's not me. Right? So I think a lot of times it's like people start to like get worried, they start to get anxious, and then they start to like imagine things and start having stories in their head, right? You're like, the person doesn't want to meet me, does it mean that the person is cheating on me or is not interested, and things like that. So I think like just having that conversation, it helps to put that in context. And I think the other thing, it's also to understand like what the other person likes. So I think understanding it and then compromising. I mean, clearly it cannot be like one person get all of their way, right? Like, so initially I just want to meet 3 times a week, like, but you want to meet like 7 days a week, right? So maybe, okay, let's kind of meet in the middle, or like maybe do things that where you don't feel like, it's pushing too much into a boundary, or like you feel like being suffocated.
Right.
Yeah.
And it sounds like communication then is the heart of,
Definitely. I think communication is the heart of everything, because like once like both parties know where they are coming from, then at least you do not have that like, I think, or I imagine, and imagination sometimes is very scary. Yes.
Now, from all your experience, Violet, matching clients, right? What patterns have you seen that have helped relationships succeed?
Actually, I read about this like many years ago, right? So it's about the secret to a long-lasting relationship or marriage, right? So this guy, he's like probably in his 70s. He was being interviewed, and then he was asked this question. So how did you, like have such a long-lasting marriage? And then his answer was, we never fell out of love at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they did fall out of love? No.
They did, but not at the same time.
Okay.
So that's very interesting. And I know a lot of people don't see it like that. Especially, like when we first fall in love, we are like, like we're going to be in love forever. I love you, But the truth of the matter is like life happens, right? Like different things happen. And there are points where like, we are not lovable, or we feel that our spouse is like not lovable. But the point, what he's trying to make is like, at every point when things are hard, things are difficult, someone held on.
So that's why it's not at the same time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So to kind of like put that into context of your question, is that someone constantly is like putting in the work. Like they take turns to put in the work to make sure that the relationship continues. And what is a sure killer for relationship, I think, is contempt. This is actually quite scary and people don't think about it very much. For those who are interested, you can check out John Gottman. So he's like really one of, like, I would say, the best relationship expert in the world, right? So he wrote many different books. And I think one of the things that he talked about is like the 4 horsemen in a relationship. And one of the things that he talked about is contempt. So he said that he can just listen to a couple argue just for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and he can predict whether they're going to get a divorce. So he's listening out for 4 things. So one is contempt, one is criticism, one is stonewalling, and one is, I think, defense.
Always defensive about.
So I think it's very important that when we argue, it's okay to argue. In fact, arguing can be healthy, right? So it's not so much about whether you argue or how often you argue, but it's really how you argue. Yeah. So it's very important that when we argue, like, we are not attacking or assassinating the person's character, but it's really about the behavior.
Right. And then trying to work through that. Because problems will arise.
For sure,
right?
for sure, 100%.
In a marriage or relationship, it's not going to be fairy tale, right?
Yes.
So it's basically, you're saying it's how we reach a resolution. Don't attack the person.
But like, don't stonewall, don't like just like disappear, or just sweep things under the carpet. Yeah, but I think the worst one is really contempt. Because when you start having that contempt, you started being resentful, and then you start like demonizing the person, you're going to start making up stories in your head. And
just a rabbit hole that you can never climb out of. Yes. I think that's really fantastic. Okay, lastly, Violet, for singles out there, like you mentioned, a lot of them do not want to get out there and do the work to meet people, right? So, or rather, it's a more passive approach rather than an active approach. What mindset shift do you think they should have in order to meet that someone?
I think first and foremost, like, they need to decide like whether this is something they really want. Yeah, because I think if they are not committed to it, right? Like, for example, my personal trainer will say, you say you want to lose weight. Do you really want to lose weight? Yeah, so same thing, right? It's like, you say you're single, you want to look for someone. Are you really committed to it, right? Because if you're committed to it, then you need to take action. I mean, dating apps is fine, but just at least learn how to use it properly, right? So just be open-minded. Like, if friends say that they have someone to introduce you to you, yeah, it's okay, just meet, no harm. Join hobbies group, like go for events. There are so many events nowadays. Like join a matchmaking service if there's something that you're interested in. So, but the most important part is you need to be committed to it, and then actually take the first step to widen your social circle. I think that's the first step.
Put yourself
out there.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much, Violet. It was
Thank
really
you.
nice talking to you. I think we've learned a lot, in terms of dating, and I hope, our audience learned that as well. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode of Open House. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Let us know in the comments what you are looking for in a relationship.